Welcome to the Long Thread podcast about spinning, stitching, and weaving by hand. This series is sponsored by Long Thread Media, publishers of Spin-Off, Piecework, and Handwoven magazines. Find us online and subscribe at longthreadmedia.com. I'm your host, co-founder Ann Marrow. Judy and Maggie have been teachers of spinning and weaving, and also retailers at Shuttles, Spindles Skeins for many years until it closed its doors. And I've asked them if they will tell me some of the insider tales of what it's like to be a yarn store owner and teacher, and how that's changed over the years. And I should add that we are joined by Nuala, who is Maggie's sheepdog, who is keeping us company on this afternoon. What initially made me want to talk to you guys is that I figured for all those years, 28 years that Shuttles, Spindles Skeins was open, there must have been, stories that you had between the two of you. And I was just wondering, what is it like behind the scenes of a yarn store?
Do you really want to know?
There are some things we cannot share.
Or we'd have to kill you. No.
Well, some of them are sort of gentle stories. Like, what would you not want someone to know?
No, of course. Yes. But, I think it was probably one of the most rewarding parts of my life, at least, just because we weren't just a store. I mean, when we opened the shop, we didn't think of it as a shop. What we originally wanted to do is Judy wanted to teach weaving and I wanted to teach spinning. We had done that at a shop that was owned by someone else and decided it was time to go out on our own. And then we realized we couldn't really teach those classes unless we had stuff to teach them with. It's hard to teach someone how to weave without yarn or how to spin without fiber.
Because our first love is teaching still, and we needed to have things that support that. Equipment, books, yarn, fiber, all of that. And so we started with a small space that we thought would be certainly big enough to last forever, and started getting some equipment in. And we had Gail Madden, who took care of our books forever, and she was excellent at choosing books that people wanted and being aware of the books that were available. So we started off, I guess, rather small compared to where we ended up. And I just remember someone coming in and saying, well, you don't have very much yarn. I thought we had tons of yarn. I was so surprised at that. And this was one of the people in the business that said that.
Actually, what happened was early on when we opened, we had a concert with Carla Siaki, who was a part of the Mother Folkers, the most carefully pronounced folk group around. And she did a great CD on weaving and spinning songs. And so she did a concert for us. And the person who had that comment was there. And the fact that we could have a concert in that very small shop probably tells you that he was right as far as the amount of yarn and equipment that we had at that point. But we'd only been open for a month or two, too.
So we started out with that. And so we expanded our yarn. Unfortunately, we expanded it into what we were using for our classroom space. That started getting really dicey because you would be having a class, but customers would want to be looking at the yarn that was on the walls around the class. And it was disconcerting to the students to have other customers in there wandering around.
And a little difficult for the customers when I was teaching a basketry class, because we had the class tables going right down the middle of the very small room, and they might get hit by a piece of basketry material as it was being flung around and woven into the baskets. So,
Not to mention the bathroom was on the other side of the classroom. So if a customer wanted to use the bathroom, they had to go to the other side. Oh, that was bad. It was hard.
we didn't know any better.
I started thinking, you were talking about how someone said, well, you don't have very much yarn. And it occurs to me also that you had all different kinds of yarn.
We did. And we decided early on that we wanted to have the whole spectrum of color of a yarn. So rather than a yarn that has, say, 40 colors and I carry 3 of them or 10 of them or something, we decided we would carry all 40 colors. So there'd be none of the, theoretically, there'd be none of this, oh, I wanted gray and you don't have it, because we would supposedly have it. So we didn't have as many different kinds of yarn in the beginning. And we didn't have nearly as many knitting yarns in the beginning because our focus, Maggie and mine, was on spinning and weaving.
So that's interesting, because what you bring to it in your own interest as spinners and weavers, and I had no idea, Maggie, that you could teach basketry, but what you bring to it from your own perspective can be a little different from what your customers are looking for.
Well, haven't you noticed when you go into a knitting shop, often they do have a focus. You know, if you would go to Utah when Nancy Bush had her shop, she'd have a lot of sock yarns, probably not a whole lot of bulky weight yarns. So I think that's the lovely thing about different shops, that they each have something to please you.
And how did that change over the years, though? I mean, what I'm knitting now is not the same as what I was knitting 20 years ago. What kind of trends did you see come through?
The scarf craze.
And that was later on.
Right.
When we first opened, because we're such snobs, we said, oh, we will only have the finest natural fibers. And then we realized that there's all those people out there that need the acrylic, that need the washable yarn. And so that's when we got Canadiana in, and we filled the room, because at that point they had more colors than almost any other yarn company, I think, for that particular yarn. You know, we decided being snobs and going out of business, or listening to what people wanted, because when it comes down to it, if they're not buying it, we're not staying in business. And there was a lot, when we first opened, there was a lot of interest in spinning and weaving. And then it went a lot to knitting.
I don't know. I
think the pendulum swings.
Right. Yeah,
because we're back to a lot of interest in spinning and weaving.
Everything cycles.
Right. Right.
But I had to laugh, because when we went to acrylic, the reason we did was the yarn rep, who happened to be the yarn rep of the acrylic yarn, pointed out that if you looked at yarn sales overall, more than 50% of yarn sales were in synthetic fibers. And we decided we liked our noses and we shouldn't cut them off.
Right.
They seem to work well on our face.
And wasn't that the yarn rep?
It's George.
Oh, was it George with Canadiana? I thought it was Dan. Okay.
No, Dan always had Cascade.
When we first opened, and we opened in September, and the following summer, because we'd been going along, you know, you have to get the word out, people have to find you, people have to be willing to come to Boulder, and we'd made this huge sale. It was very, very exciting. This man called, and he wanted to buy a loom and yarn and equipment and
a spinning wheel.
And a spinning wheel. He wanted to buy it all for his girlfriend or wife or something.
Yeah.
And he wanted to know, just please add it all up, tell him the amount, and he would bring a cashier's check so she wouldn't know. Oh, so wonderful. So he came in on a Friday, and at 10 to 6, right before closing, gave us the cashier's check. I was not working at the time, so I'm totally innocent. Maggie, however, was working, and Maggie, being the kind, thoughtful person she is, not only helped him get the loom out to his car, but
The baby wolf.
yes, it was a baby wolf, loaned him her bungee cords.
And a blanket.
And it was a blanket too.
It was a
Okay.
blanket, yeah.
So that he could safely take that loom.
And the spinning wheel.
And the spinning wheel. And what kind of spinning wheel?
Luette. It was a Luette.
It was a Luette. Okay. So the next, it was so wonderful. We cashed that check. I put it in the bank.
It was summer. Summer is never a good time for a knit shop, at least
No, they just,
not here.
yes, not consistently. So put that check in the bank. I wrote checks. I paid bills. Life was so good. And then the following Saturday, in the mail, it said the check was no good. It's like, what? We went over to the bank. It's like they couldn't figure it out. Well, what had happened is he'd made it in his basement. And the bank, the original bank, whatever, the first bank didn't figure it out.
Our bank.
Our
couldn't
bank
tell.
didn't figure it out, couldn't tell. And so it wasn't until it went to the bank that it was drawn on or however it worked. I was on the phone really, really fast calling all these, and it's a Saturday.
Was it a Saturday? Because Dan was there.
Yeah, wasn't it Saturday or was it a
I
Friday?
thought it was a Friday.
Maybe it was a
Yeah.
Friday. Anyhow, we had to call everyone. And I'll tell you, we called Shacked, we called, I don't know, Glamocra, Brown Sheep Company, Casket. I had paid so many bills and everybody was wonderful. We told them what had happened. They said, don't worry about it because, of course, and the bank said, don't worry if those checks come in.
We'll hold them.
We'll hold them and not, because that would have done us in.
What was really interesting, though, what made us love one of our yarn reps was
Dan.
it took me a while because I got to take the check over to the bank. So I was over at the bank trying to figure out why the check wasn't any good. And Dan was there and he wound yarn for the customers.
He started helping out.
He was just the most amazing help.
I was
So-
falling apart.
From then on, whatever yarn he repped, we bought.
We would buy that yarn. Yep. That was great.
Wow. Well, and then I remember there was a time not that long ago when somebody hid in the bathroom.
Yeah.
They actually hid in the space.
No, I think they hid in the bathroom because that's the only place I didn't check. The bathroom in the big classroom.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Back there.
But I think we need to finish up the story about the theft
Oh,
of the
please.
guy.
Sorry
Oh,
about
yeah.
that.
There is more. So it turns out we were not the only ones taken in by this guy. He was just a real cad. I mean, one of the things he did is he wrote one of his bad checks to a couple who was selling their computers to pay for their baby's hospital bills. This we found out because, I don't know, a couple of weeks later,
A month. Yes.
yeah, we looked outside and there were 3 men, I think.
Oh, the FBI came.
No, ATF.
Was it ATF? I thought it was the FBI because it was across state lines.
No, it's because I think ATF does banks. But
Okay.
but whoever it was somebody
Men in
governmental.
suits.
Men in black, basically. White shirts and dark suits, which stood out so much in our shopping center. We knew right away. They were not from our planet.
So did they eventually find out who this was?
They did. And he did go to jail. And we got part of our money back.
We got $9 a month for a year.
Do we know what happened? Did he just sell on the loom and the...
No, he actually got the loom. I don't know about the spinning wheel, but he got the loom for his mother-in-law who lives in Nebraska. And the loom has a serial number. I said, I will get the loom. I will drive to Nebraska. I will pick up the loom. It has a serial number. I can identify it. Here it is. No,
They wouldn't let us.
they wouldn't let us. They wouldn't tell us where it went.
But yes,
Obviously, it still makes me very angry.
what annoyed me was we would get this check from prison.
Oh.
But then we would get it, and then I would have to fill out a form and put a stamp on it and send it back saying that, yes, indeed, we had gotten this check.
So you got $9 minus whatever the cost of a stamp
Indeed.
was.
Right. And it was just,
And envelope. We had to use our envelope.
it was just, hey, come here, heavy breather. Do you want to tell her why? Do you want to tell them why? Come here, girl.
Why there's what?
Heavy breathing every once in a while.
Yes. So Nuala has been very good and very patient, but and so she's circling looking for pets.
Yes.
Nuala the sheepdog. So I'm sorry, I had only heard the story secondhand, but there was a point a couple of years ago when there was a miscreant in the store after hours.
Yes. It was January and it was a really chaotic time because we were having a new carpet put down in the retail area. So we had people moving everything around.
At this time, we've moved to a bigger space. We're in a much bigger space.
Right.
And we're having the carpet replaced. To replace a carpet, you have to move everything out of the space.
And we were just working on that. We hadn't had the movers come at that point but what the guy did was he hid. I saw him earlier. He was just wandering around, and you know how something just often sets a bell off that he just didn't seem like a weaver or a spinner or someone
or a husband
or a friend. Yeah. And then it got so busy because we were trying to pack things up to get ready to move.
I'm assuming he didn't pay himself in cashmere.
No, he wasn't very bright. All he took was the cash register. He broke the cash register.
Oh, made me mad. The cash register cost more than the money in the cash register. And and he didn't take the change because that was kind of scattered all over. But it turned out that he and an accomplice had been going around the shopping center and hiding in bathrooms. And so we weren't the only one.
No.
And then they wanted to know, is anything else gone? Who knows? We would have no idea. Absolutely none.
That's right. You'll know when you do inventory in January.
We wouldn't even know then.
Well, and I don't know whether I like this story better or Judy likes this story better, but one of my favorite stories about somebody who was in the yarn shop after hours who didn't belong was me. I had come down, I had taken your weaving class,
Mm-hmm.
and I needed to finish up my project, and I was driving down from work, and I think I got there at like 5:55 and the shop closed at 6. And so I said hello to the people in the front, and I went to the back, and
you did not say hello to me.
I don't think
you weren't there when I got there.
Okay.
No, you weren't there when I got there.
She got there early enough that we had not switched.
Anyway, so I
was not told that.
I love how this story is turning into a Shaggy Dog story with our Shaggy Dog. Right. So I was trying to be quiet because I was afraid I was going to get kicked out.
Well, you were at that point, we had 3 huge rooms, and you were all the way in the back classroom working where you would not, at that point, the classroom did not have yarn and things in it. So you were all by yourself. You weren't disturbing anyone. It was wonderful.
Well, and I didn't turn the lights on, but this was a loom with metal heddles, and I was trying to weave quickly. And unless I was at the hem stitching part of it when you came in, I can't imagine that I was all that quiet. But I wanted to finish up and not get kicked out, so I finished up and I looked around and I thought it's awfully quiet here. And
all the lights were out by that time.
All the lights were out. And I saw a panel on the wall that looked like a security panel. And of course you can get out of the store when you're the only person there. It would be a safety issue not to.
Right.
But I thought, am I going to set off all the alarms? And I think I had to call around to get your number, Judy. But I called and I said, Judy, how do I get out of the shop?
You're in the shop? It was, you're in the shop? Where are you in the shop? I just remember being flummoxed.
And I think your first words were, please don't take the cashmere, but you can have all the acrylic you want. And we determined that the alarm panel was not hooked up.
Right.
I didn't want to tell this story while the store was still open because I didn't want to go telling everybody, by the way,
we never had.
You can just run out the door.
Yes, but I've been locked in a yarn store. Not quite overnight, but...
But it wasn't as exciting as a night in the museum.
The yarn did not come to life around me.
Good. And we learned to check much more carefully after that, too. Going all the way back. I remember glancing in the room, dark. Everybody was gone, turned out the rest of the lights and went home.
Had to tell the folks who were working in the front, by the way, next time, say if there's somebody in the shop.
Yes. Tell those other people. Well, and people are always asking us, do you have very much theft? And the answer is probably. What we have noticed being taken more than anything are our samples. When we do inventory, oh, look, here's this empty hanger stuffed way behind the yarn. That's where that sweater went. And one Christmas, it was Roxana's hats, right?
Or Sharon's.
Sharon's. It was almost every day we lost a hat. There's another hat gone. There's another hat gone. It was amazing, and we just hope those people needed the hat. Margaret was in the back. This is when we're in the much bigger space, and she was in the back eating, and she noticed this woman wandering through basically stacks of our extra yarn. And she watched her put a bag of yarn, a bag of 10 skeins of yarn kind of under her coat. And so Margaret said, can I help you? Are you finding what you need? And she's like, oh yes, I want to buy this, and I'm just going to go down to my car and get my purse. So I'll come back and buy this. Okay. It was an acrylic yarn. She could have had it. I don't know. It's like, no. Go for the expensive yarn if you're going to steal. I mean, come on.
Well, and it's interesting because, one of the things about having Shuttles was, certainly known all over, but had the heart of such a local shop. So, you got to know the folks who were students and regulars, and what was it like to have a rotating cast with some walk-ons coming through your life every day?
It was a lot of fun.
Always interesting. Yeah. I mean, that was the best part. Even when people weren't taking classes, we always felt everyone who worked for us was always teaching, because I still say we had the most overqualified, underpaid people in Boulder.
Yes.
Because they were so skillful in what they did. And our policy was that if someone came in with a knitting problem, we sat them down at the table and somebody sat with them and worked it out. It didn't matter whether it was our yarn or not, because our theory was if we helped them with this project, they'd want to do another project, and perhaps they'd come back and buy our yarn the next time. And, that just standing behind the counter and helping and taking money from people wouldn't have been nearly as
That isn't
rewarding.
what we were about.
No.
Not at all. And it would be the summer and the vacations. We would get a lot of people who'd never been in, had a problem, and most of them were so apologetic. I didn't buy my yarn here. I'm from Boston or Los Angeles, and I'm really stuck, and can you help me? And of course we would help them. And usually they would buy something, or they'd at least wander about, or the next time they were in town, they would come back. And it's the repeat customers that you want. Oftentimes we had people that came in just to be there, not to buy, just because they wanted to talk to us. They wanted to be around a friendly atmosphere, surrounded by lovely yarn. I mean,
And a shaggy dog.
and a shaggy dog. We always
Or
had
two or
that
three.
shaggy dog there. Yes. But yeah, you just sometimes you want to get away, and they would. So many people found us their getaway.
So what was the oddest thing? What were the oddest things that people came in and asked for?
One of my favorite is when they come in and they want a strong yarn. So we'll say, here's the 3-2 pearl cotton. I cannot break the 3-2 pearl cotton. And they would take it and they would muscle through and break. No, I need something stronger than this. I said, I cannot help you. I every now and then we get somebody in that would do that. I don't know what they're going to do with this strong yarn, but it had to be thin and had to be strong.
My favorite was, could you show me where the good yarn is?
Oh, yes.
And
We only have bad yarn.
And I
here.
never said it, but I always wanted to say, well, you see that door back there? Go knock 3 times. And
I always wanted to tell them we save that for our good customers. Neither of which would be very good to do. But yes.
I think most people who work in retail have a shorter tongue than other people just because they've had to bite it so often
That many times.
to keep some what they want to say.
So, I think that, people who don't work in or certainly own yarn stores, spinning and weaving shops, some people have this fantasy about how wonderful it would be. And then you think about it and you think, oh, but, my hobby would become my job and these people who are my friends become my customers. But it sounds like you kind of, while recognizing, and laughing at some of the more difficult times, really enjoyed it.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Enjoyed it a lot. And you get to meet the most fascinating people. And some of the conversations that get started have nothing to do with yarn, but you learn so much. Yeah, I don't know. They start talking about geology or something. I mean, we're in Boulder, and it's fascinating. And people will come in and they'll see a friend. I didn't know you knit. Oh, you're a weaver? I mean, it was like back in the old days, and you'd go to the corner store, which was the only one in town, and it was just fun. It was always just fun.
So
It was mostly just fun. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
One of the things that Judy got to do was we had a customer come in and she wanted to make a shawl for her son's bar mitzvah.
Oh,
I
yes.
was trying to think of the proper word for shawl, but and she didn't weave,
She'd never woven.
right? But Judy set her up, and she wove the most beautiful
Tallis?
tallis.
Tallit.
Or tallit.
Tallit.
Tallit, yeah.
Yes, she did. The son came in and did it out of Jaeger spun wool silk. And the son chose the colors. And the most exciting part was she took it with her when they went to visit Israel. And she was showing it to some of the people there. And they could not believe how wonderful it was. They were so impressed. She came back. She was so thrilled.
She wanted to buy the case that the tallit is stored in. So I think she was close to the wall in Jerusalem. Jerusalem. And that's where a lot of the weavers are. And so she took the shawl in because she wanted it embroidered in the proper colors and everything like that. And they were astounded that she wove it.
It was pretty fun.
Yeah.
So how many people come in and say, I want to learn to in order to make a particular thing?
The other one we had specifically was a man who wanted to make a blanket in his family tartan for the grandson that his daughters were never going to have children, and now they're going to have a grandson. So we set him up, and he was on the big loom that was right at the front of the store, which was wonderful because he was so happy to talk to people, tell them what he was doing, show them the tartan. And because I didn't work every day, it pretty much became whenever he had a problem, whoever was there would help him with the problem, which really worked out well. And so he did it, and it was great. And then just a couple of years ago, he came back because there was 2 more grandchildren coming from the children that were having none. And so this time he put on 2 blankets and he wove it again. And he pretty much just needed to be reminded how to thread the loom. And we all helped him. And it was great. And I didn't have to thread the loom for a while. Gave me a break.
How many people do you think you've taught? Okay, let's do this. How many beginners do you think you've taught over the years?
A lot. A whole lot.
Well, you think that when we began, you taught your 8-week class twice during every...
Times 4.
Times 4, right.
So if we had 16 times 4, so say 50 a year and multiply that.
Well, but the other thing is, too, we didn't just one day wake up and say, oh, I want to own a spinning and weaving shop. We had both had experience. Not only were we weavers and spinners, but we had worked for another weaving and spinning shop before, and taught there. We weren't just the little old ladies who wanted to open a shop.
Not at that point. At that point, we were young.
But still, it was really interesting. This was in the early 90s, and talking about how times have changed. We went to the bank to get a loan, and we had both worked for this other shop. You had actually worked a lot longer than I had,
mm-hmm.
and you had taken a lot of the owner's duties over as well too. I mean, you had done
right. Yes.
And had you worked for Shacked at that time too?
No, I had done some work. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So she had respectable
qualifications for our business.
Right.
And we had a business plan. Here's our business plan. Oh, we were so smart. We went in there. We were so naive.
And they said,
what's the equity in your house?
Because we were women and we had no experience.
And it was a new endeavor.
Right, yeah.
And I found out recently, actually, that when the man we talked to actually lease us the space and everything, to himself said, they're not going to last very long at all.
So how do you think you went from being, smart teachers with experience in the industry somewhat, to being able to make the kind of decisions that keep a fiber business going for 28 years?
Little by little. And we started out small, and then we grew, made some stupid mistakes.
Yes.
We expanded into the large space 2 seconds before the housing boom collapsed. So that was the year we always had a potluck on Rock Day, which is always the day after 12th night. And I knew we were in trouble when we went around, because I asked what their spinning resolutions for the year were, and so many people said, I'm going to spin my stash. And it was like, oh dear. And it did affect business a lot. And so our timing was way off as far as expanding,
mm-hmm.
because business did not. And I think that was fairly close after the scarf craze as well, too.
The scarf craze was 2004, and this was like 7.
Yeah. So.
Yes. So we were still riding high on the scarf craze. And with that one, so many Saturdays, you would have Louise Bradley sitting on the floor with 4 or 5, usually young women, usually about college age, learning to knit. They wanted to do a scarf. And they would. And people would come in all the time wanting to do a scarf. And then a few years ago, someone, I don't know who, some magazines decided that having big fluffy blankets on the back of your couch would look so wonderful. And everybody wanted to come in and make one of those big fluffy blankets.
Out of roving.
And so if nothing else, I always wanted the customers to know that we would not lie to them. And so I would say, it's such a bad idea. You really can't clean it. It's going to cost you hundreds and hundreds of dollars. It's going to fall apart. Do you have a cat or dog? You do? Well, it's not going to last more than a day. And I would say, why don't you take enough just to do, say, a scarf and see how that goes? And it was such a bad idea.
Well, and it's still around. Yeah. And a lot of people, they look lovely. I think there are some fibers out now that have acrylic in them that hold together a little bit better than roving do. But yeah.
What are some other funny fads you've seen? Now, there was a woven wall hanging trend that I think, to some extent, there's another trend of people wanting to express themselves on a simple loom. But the woven wall hanging trend was, did one day just a whole bunch of people come in and say, I want to make this thing?
Everything cycles. When I started weaving in the 70s, that's when big hangings that are very popular today.
With fluffy yarns.
With yarns. And
a lot of texture.
Fringe. Yeah. Were popular. I mean, it's many of the things that you see today that are supposed to be very new and exciting are exactly what we were doing in the 70s. All of us, except then as we got tired of it and started using smaller and smaller yarns. But there are some really lovely things going on. Just like if you look at some of the macrame pieces that are out now, they are exquisite. But when you mention macrame, all I can think of is those jute plant hangers that I made so many of. So
my hands hurt just thinking about it.
So Judith McKenzie, who, as far as I'm concerned, is the world's best spinning teacher, will often say, as far as art yarn, she's been through it, I think, 5 times at least. Yeah, I think it's 5 times. I've been through it 3. But she was born with a spindle in her hand, I swear.
And then there's all the different kinds. I mean, there was a moment when the yarns changed. I mean, it seems, I don't, you would know a lot better than I would, but it seems like there was a moment in the late 90s, early 2000s when eyelash yarn, which just hadn't really been a thing before, or ladder yarn, which hadn't really been.
Mm-hmm. And that happened about the same time as the scarf craze. So, yeah, the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And people were loving it and using it. And when you talk about making mistakes, one of our mistakes, which it took a long time to get over, was getting rid of yarn that wasn't selling. So the eyelash, the ladder yarn, it came, it was great, and then it went away. But we held on a little longer than we should have.
Of course, we held off a little bit at the beginning as well, too. We should have jumped in it faster, understood. It is interesting, though, when the scarf craze came about, that was all, it was not industry instigated at all. It was all the people who wanted to make scarves. I don't know where that came from. And I think the industry, the yarn industry, has tried to create something like that again. Socks, kind of, but maybe haven't. Shawls, there are a lot of people, but no, nothing has hit everybody's, I must do this, the way scarves did. And what a lot of people were doing was they didn't want to really knit. They just wanted to make scarves. They had didn't want to make a sweater, didn't want to make a hat, just scarves. And one of our yarn reps just called them scarfers.
Not knitters, not crocheters, just scarfers.
Just scarfers. Yeah.
Well, that is the risk. I mean, if you don't bring it in, you can't sell it.
Right.
But so there's a risk in either being too, bullish on something or being too conservative about
Too
it.
Cautious. Yeah. And it also has to be, again, going back to each shop has its own personality. Eyelash yarn, not on the top of either one of ours lists of what we want to do.
Some of those other, ladder yarns and things like that actually are kind of fun for weaving.
Indeed.
They are. Yes.
And I remember there was a discussion about, is novelty yarn a bad word? And there came a point where in knitting, novelty yarn was a bad word, but in weaving, it seemed like it didn't really take that on.
No. Novelty yarns are so much fun in weaving. They just add that little bit of extra. What I've really seen in the last number of years is the more expensive, what do you want to call them? More cashmere, alpaca. People aren't satisfied just to have wool anymore or cotton. The knitters want what do you call them? More luxurious fibers.
The luxury fibers.
What is that? Kiviot. Oh, we get people coming in. We'd like to buy some Kiviot.
So would we.
Yeah. Sorry, our bank account's not that good because it just llama, camel. I mean, a lot of animal fibers people never would have thought about using, and they're wonderful. So a lot of that has been happening in the last, 5 years, 6 years, 10?
More longer than that. What I love, though, is that as far as wool, there's more of an emphasis on breed-specific yarns.
Oh, right. Merino wool.
Now, for a while, everybody who came in only wanted merino. And it's like, well, okay, that's like saying I only want vanilla ice cream. I never want Rocky Road.
That'd be fine.
If she could have a Scotch ice cream, she would be so happy.
There we go.
But right now, I think there is a real trend to see what other wool fibers will do, which I love because merino is a lovely fiber, but it can only do so much. If I am scraping the snow off my car, I do not necessarily want to be wearing merino gloves. I want something that is going to hold up a little bit more. For a while, I had some cashmere gloves. I think I went through those. They were commercially made. I think I wore a hole in them maybe the first week just walking the dog. So if we could just learn more about the fibers and their qualities and how to take advantage of them.
Yeah. We had one grandmother come in, just a delightful woman, first grandchild, and we did have that cashmere sweater, that little baby cashmere sweater, right. And she wanted to make that for her. Oh, I tried to talk her out of it. It's like, you have to hand wash it, and it's cashmere, and it's a baby, and he'll wear it 20 minutes and be done.
And throw up on it.
Oh, and she knitted, and it was expensive, even for the little one. And when she came back for the next grandchild, it was not cashmere. And she even mentioned that maybe that wasn't the best idea, but I kind of put it in the same category as like a christening gown. You do it, or a wedding gown. You spend way more money probably than you should for something that isn't going to get worn a lot, but it's
hopefully with a wedding gown, not that often.
Well, not too often, but it's a very special thing. And sometimes you want to do something that is even more special than you normally would.
Mm-hmm. So, Judy, do you spin at all?
Yes, I know how. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Maggie has a weaving.
She weaves. Yes.
Maggie weaves. But the two of you sort of specialized.
I think that's one reason why it was easy to be partners. When we first were deciding to do this, Judy was talking to her family, and they said, well, who's going to have the controlling interest? Who's going to have you both can't have equal
Well, the
say
lawyer
into
said
things.
that, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I thought it was your family.
No, it was the lawyer.
Okay. And so when
So-
Judy told me that, I said, okay, I'll take the 51%.
And actually, what we did was we came up with, I don't know, you can have 5 51%ers a year. So if there's something that you feel really strongly about, we must carry this yarn. I must have this fiber. I'm doing 51%. And that'd be it. The other partner had to go along. And there were some times when we both said 51% about something. It's like, oh, we both agree. Okay, good. But, that made it easy. And the other thing that made it easy is usually we either agreed or it was easy enough to say, she cares more, she knows more, let her make the decision on that. And so it just worked. And there was not that much friction. Things kind of fell.
Yes, there was one really,
Which one?
the
What?
carpet.
Judy pays most of the bills, and so she was less than thrilled to pay that bill.
When we got a new carpet for the retail area, we'd been in that space for
2000, and we got the carpet in 17, 16.
yeah, and we tried to get the shopping center to at least put some money in, and
Huh.
not
No.
so much.
No.
But I really wanted the new carpet, so we did go around with that. But I think that's the only one where there was really a disagreement.
Well, and then you had to add the cost of the cash register and the
Right. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. It cost even more.
But after a while, you did
The
decide.
carpet looked really, really nice. And I think for me, the best thing about putting the carpet in is we rearranged the whole space and I think made it nicer.
Yeah.
It just worked. It was time. So it all worked out for a lot of
Deep
money.
sigh. And the reason we rearranged it was because, of course, we had to take all the shelves and everything out of the space so they could put down the carpet. And then we didn't know exactly where we'd put things, even though I took pictures,
Right.
but didn't take exact measurements. So
And the people that worked for us all had their own ideas. And one of the smartest things we ever did was listen to them. Someone told us early on, always hire people smarter than yourself. Not a problem. And they had ideas on ways to set it up. It just worked.
Mhm.
It just worked so well. So much. Yeah, it just worked better than it had been. And that was really nice. We still had, of course, the customers that would come in and look at the entire huge wall of yarn, piled literally to the ceiling, every color represented 12 or 20 skeins, and say, are these all the colors you have? No, we keep the good colors in the back.
and then you have to knock on that door.
these are all the colors they make.
Yes. I'm so sorry. But it is always kind of fun. And it's a lot of fun with people playing with colors. And people will have colors spread out all over the floor, which I think is great. Trying to figure it out. They want to get it right. And when they ask me what color they should pick, I say to them, if you're making it for me, here's the one I like.
So I think word started getting around this time last year in 2019 that you two were looking to not be running shuttles, at that time in 2020.
We put it in the newsletter.
Yeah.
And we told people about it. Our lease was up, and they don't like doing a year to year. They like doing 3 or 5 years, or preferably 10. And we had done that length of time before, but it was time.
Well, and I think, I think restaurants have the smallest profit margin. And I think knitting shops are pretty close to being
Very
second as far
close.
as that. It's really seasonal. Gianbroco and Sons, which is a gardening shop in Arvada, but Carrie always sets up in the shopping center. And when Carrie shows up, we know our business is going to go down. Not because of him, but it's just when the weather warms up, people put away their needles. One woman came in and she said, I am a foul weather knitter. I knit when it's cold, but when the weather heats up,
And
the needles go down. So, and that can make it tough.
Well, we're just as bad. We spend our money on the plants.
I know. The other problem, but we still knit and spin.
Yes, but probably not as much. I don't know.
So I think a lot of us hoped that there would be someone would come in on their white horse and buy the shop. But then earlier this year, it sort of became clear that the shop would be closing.
Yes.
And it sort of, was all at once because of the pandemic.
Right. Well, they had a white horse. They didn't have a big enough check.
Mm.
And basically it was because of the inventory.
We had so many people write to us wanting to buy the business. So we went through this whole process. As soon as we sent out, we told them the letter that you put together.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we have in inventory.
This is the wholesale inventory.
Wholesale inventory, which did not include all of the cabinets, all of the looms for teaching, all of the wheels for teaching, all of the everything else, basket, all the stuff we had for teaching. That was it. There was absolutely no way that anyone could afford it. And the one offer we did get, he wanted us to carry him. And we decided early on.
When you say carry him, what does that mean?
He buys the shop from us by giving us, $100 a month or something.
Oh,
so
like rent to own
like
the shop.
we're a bank.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But as it turns out, it was probably one of the best business decisions we ever made because of the pandemic. I mean, to have tried to keep that shop open and be able to pay the rent with the limited number of people, again, going back to restaurants, I can really understand how hard it is for a restaurant to try to maybe not even make a profit, but break even on 25% or whatever it is.
Yes.
We went to the Longmont yarn shop to talk to Gail. That's the other thing. I think most of the shops in this area, none of them are really in competition. We all work together, which is why the yarn crawl was such a success all those years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But she's handling it really well, but to only be able to allow so many people in the shop at the same time and to allow social distancing and worry about how to keep all that yarn clean. Yeah.
All the surfaces clean.
All the surfaces, yeah. It just, as sad as I am to not have the shop. And I think there's a lot of grief in closing the shop because
Of course.
it's kind of like, I don't know, sending your kid off.
Worse than sending them off to college.
Yeah.
We had it longer than we had the kids before they went to college.
Yeah.
Although, I heard Amy Poehler say of her now finished marriage that she thought that, something that lasted for 15 years, and if you were still friends at the end, that was still a pretty good outcome.
Indeed.
Right.
And in a way, you guys are still talking in the present tense. The shop closed several months ago, but
The retail storefront closed.
The building.
Yes, we don't have that space anymore. We now have our houses and 3 storage units where we have a lot of inventory still. And Maggie has the teaching wheels here. I have a lot of the looms at my place. We both have stuff in our houses from the shop because we got 1 storage unit, realized that wouldn't be good, got the 2nd storage unit, and then it's like, oh, when I went back to order the 3rd storage unit, the man said, I'll give you a great deal if you want to buy the whole bank. So we still have a lot of stuff, which we're still selling, and we both want to keep teaching. So obviously we will continue to have, especially for spinning and weaving equipment, books, things like that available. And who knows when we'll be able to go back to a real classroom.
Hands-on teaching.
Hands-on teaching.
But I noticed that the Shuttles spin-in is still happening.
It is. It's interesting. We just had it last Monday, and we had 30 people, 1 from Alaska, 1 from Michigan, 1 from New Mexico, and who am I forgetting? Oh, California, Ursula. Yeah. So we actually get about the same number of people, but people who could not come to the physical spin-in can come on Zoom. What I miss most about it, and I think we all do, is we do a show and tell, which is great fun. So we all see what everybody is doing, but we don't have that lovely chit chat that you have just while you're sitting next to somebody and spinning.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, that was to the dog.
Well, and there was something where the show and tell involved passing things around.
Indeed. So you could not only see it, but feel it.
You could touch it. Mm-hmm.
And once we can get back to normal, we will have a space. The other thing is that Roxana Bartlett started community knitting. I don't know how, fairly soon after.
Just a few years. She was one of the first employees.
Yeah. And what she would do is she would have a group once a month, and she would come up with a pattern that she designed, all kids' things. And we provided the yarn. They provided the sweat equities, so to speak, and the needles and things like that. And then they would start the program. They would start the project at the meeting and then finish it and bring it back the next month and donate it. And so, oh my gosh, she got together so many things for children in need. We started out giving things to the reservation in the Midwest, and then the person who was in charge of sending things to that particular reservation, I think she actually died.
Mm-hmm.
So then we focused on children in need in Boulder County. And that is still going on as well, too. So they are meeting, too. So Shuttles lives on in a couple of different ways.
Yeah. Well, that is so exciting. And I actually recently made a quick purchase from you guys, too. I was like, do you have one of these? Why, yes, I think we might have one in the storage unit. I'll get back to you. So their website is still up and running?
Yes.
The website is still up and running. We're working on getting what we do have up so people can see it. At this point, they email and say, do you have a 15-inch flip loom that I could buy? And the answer is yes or no. We look at what we have in the storage, and then we just make arrangements to meet them so we can do it safely.
Curbside sometimes.
Yes, it is curbside.
Your curbside spinning and weaving shop.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, it is just so exciting to think about having, taught so many folks all around the world how to spin and weave, and there still being plans to do that more in the future, just in a different place.
Format. Yes, exactly. One of my favorite stories is woman who lives in Belfast and considers us her local yarn shop.
Ireland?
Yeah.
Yes, at Belfast. Sorry.
My folks live in Maine, and I thought, wow.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Ireland.
In Ireland.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So it really does go around the world. And this year, actually, someone came back and they had been over, we could still go over in, I don't know, France or Italy or somewhere. And something came up about they were from Boulder and they're like, oh, do you know this yarn store? She was amazed.
Mm. Yes.
But Boulder's a great place to have a yarn store because we've got the university. We have people, what have we got? NIST, NCAR. So people from all over the world are coming to Boulder.
The Hackney Trails.
But I mean coming here and actually living for a while. And
Colorado, for some reason, has... I wonder if you have an idea why. Colorado's been such a great place for fiber. I mean, Halcyon Yarn was probably gone to Maine by the time you guys thought about starting, but
No.
well, by the time we started, but
Yes, but that lumen there came from Halcyon.
we both,
She was in Denver.
yes,
right. So Halcyon Yarn, of course, Linda started Interweave up the road in Loveland.
Barry started Shacked,
Mhm.
Barry and Dan. I think it was just serendipitous that so many people started businesses that turned incredible.
I think it's the water.
Well, and then Deborah Chandler,
Her folks, Green Tree Ranch.
and Barry Shack tells a story about how he started Shack Spindle because she asked him for a spindle order.
Right.
So there is something about this place.
And Barry owned the weaving shop when it was in Boulder, and the people who bought it when he decided to sell was
Debbie and Eric Redding.
right, who then became Deborah when they separated.
Mhm.
That's when she decided to become Deborah Chandler.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
And that's where we both learned a lot. I mean, you already wove before you moved here.
Right. And Debbie asked me, they were separating when I came in, and she asked me if I would teach, and Eric said he would like me to work in the shop. And I said, sure. I mean, I missed teaching. I had taught before, but middle school. And I tell my classes, I've never had a student in my weaving classes that actually threw a chair at me. So consider myself lucky.
Well, I remember one time, Maggie, that you were leaving a class. I think it was a class at SOAR, a spinning class. And somebody said to you, well, Maggie, how'd it go? And you said, well, nobody cried, nobody left.
It is what spinning teachers tell each other. How'd it go? Nobody cried. And it's just because people are so hard on themselves. It's not the technique, but we have to learn to not have high expectations when we're trying something new. And we should always try something new. Always, always, always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for making time for me on this lovely afternoon. And I look forward to spinning and weaving with you in person soon.
Anon.
Anon. Yes, that would be great.
Thank you for listening to the Long Thread podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks again.